Tales from Earthsea, a production by Studio Ghibli, and an adaptation of Ursula K. Le Guin's masterpiece, Wizard of Earthsea series. Well, this is not what I wanted it to be. Unfortunately, Studio Ghibli seems to be falling into the territory of suffering from success here a bit, whereas they set the bar so high for themselves, they are so consistently just extraordinary in their production that once they actually kind of do something that's just mediocre, it leaves an all the more sour taste in your mouth because you know what could have been, and it feels like almost a betrayal. And that's kind of the territory that Tales from Earthsea is landing in. It's not a bad movie. I would say it falls into fine. There are people online who are like, I don't know, saying this is like a 2 out of 10. It's not that bad. This is more just like in that 5 out of 10 territory. I would say it's average and better than what a lot of people could possibly do, and that's okay. But would I put this even in the same ballpark as Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke or Howl's Moving Castle? No. And with some research and looking into Le Guin's response to this movie, this is actually going to get into territory of like minor scandal here. I don't mean to like oversell it or try to be dramatic for clicks, but Studio Ghibli, without question, lied to the author and seemingly took like steps out of their way to be disloyal in this adaptation, even though Le Guin gave them a ton of free rein and had a lot of faith, it seemed. So we're gonna get into all of that after a quick word from today's sponsor. In a world where skills are limited, sharing them is difficult. This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is the online learning what? Community. That's right, where you have a topic maybe you want to learn a little bit more about. You go on Skillshare, you clickety-clack that keyboard, bam, you find it. Maybe you want to be like a low-budget filmmaker. Oh my god, look at the title of this one. Low-budget filmmaking. You can get started on a new career path, new hobby, or just a random interest that you've been considering for a long time for less than $10 a month. That's like a couple cups of coffee tops if you use the annual subscription. When I was getting started with video editing or software engineering, if I had had Skillshare available to me, I would have been a lot better, a lot faster. And with that less than $10 a month annual subscription, of course, there's no ads, and you're supporting the creators who are helping provide these lessons. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, go ahead and check out the link in my description and get a free limited time trial of Skillshare. And that's right, you get a free trial. You don't have to commit to nothing. You just check it on out. Is it for you? Cool. Good, boop. Is it not? Good, boop. You've lost nothing. So back to the video. The plot is kind of just meh. There's not really an execution of greater themes, and when it comes to the adaptation part of the review, that's something we'll get into a lot more, so let's just move on here. The voice work was quite good, and I enjoyed the music. That was actually kind of closer to what I was expecting from, you know, the Ghibli godly production we know and love, but then when it came to the visuals, that's where this began to suffer. Watching something like Spirited Away, every single frame is a piece of art. There is never a wasted second through the movie where you don't just have your jaw on the floor and appreciate the level of effort going into it. Wizard of Earthsea is well above what a lot of animation studios can do, but it's not in that territory by a mile. There's just like, yeah, certain moments are hitting these highs, these like, oh, that shot's great, it looks wonder, and back into just like, I don't know, typical anime level. And that's like, again, it's just that suffering from success where they've set the bar for themselves, they don't hit it, and you're disappointed when they do not. Yeah, a lot of that here is just, Now, okay, I'm gonna switch into the bigger, more bulky, chunkier side of this review, and that's gonna be how this failed as an adaptation of Le Guin's work, and how this really left a bitter taste in my mouth. Earthsea, for me, like, I saw the more negative reviews for this, and I thought, maybe this is because people who like Ghibli don't necessarily like the themes and ideas of typical Western fantasy, and they just didn't like this for that reason, and, you know, I will. No. Not only was I disappointed because my chance to see Ghibli do dragons well just fell flat, but when it came to actually taking the beautiful messages from Earthsea and bringing them in, and these messages like fit with Ghibli like a glove, they dropped the ball pretty much entirely, almost going antithetical in the directions of many of the lighter, deeper themes of the book itself. Because in the actual book, there is this greater complex of good versus evil, where there's not this just simple externalized villain that you kill and you solve all problems. That's something that Le Guin took great effort to avoid. This is deeper, this is more nuanced than that. Ghibli undid that? Even though that seems like something Ghibli would excel at, is not having just a dumb, okay, villain, go deal with them, attack them. Instead, they just take a character from the books and shift their role and make it so that, yes, if you take them out, that just solves the problem and everything's okay, done. Why? There's also a lot of stuff to do with nature in the source material that, while they did depict nature beautifully in this movie, that's where the highest effort shots are, they just don't really communicate the same importance or messages from nature and humanity and the balance there. You've literally done that before in movies like Princess Mononoke. Why wouldn't you be able to do it again, or just do it in a slightly different new way? Like, what's happening here? And then there's the fact that I thought maybe, like, I was going insane and I just wasn't remembering the stories from Wizard of Earthsea very well. But after doing a little bit of research and some skim rereading, no, I was right. The story they told is just not in the books, like, at all. It's a horrible adaptation. In terms of a movie, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. I'm not angry at, like, the experience of the movie itself. It's fine. But in terms of adaptation, this is going into, like, intentionally doing a disservice to the source material territory. And I'm genuinely, like, kind of upset, because it seemed like a match made in heaven. It's like I had two friends go on a date, and then at the end of the date, I come to check up and see, like, oh, how'd you guys go? And one of them just shot the other one in the chest. Like, why? What happened here? So I actually did a little bit of digging, because I wanted to know, what does Le Guin think of this? What happened with the production? And there's a little bit of a narrative that I want to spin, and then I'm going to have some conjecture. And just remember that some of my conjecture is certainly conjecture. Please note, the stuff I'm about to pull from is Le Guin's own blog. So this is the author's recounting of what went down, and it doesn't make Ghibli look awesome. I just want to keep that in mind so it doesn't seem like I'm just kind of like pulling at straws to throw dirt in some way. I'm going off what the author herself has said about the adaptation and the process. So after doing some research, it seems what happened, how this property ended up at Ghibli, was in the early 80s, Hayao Miyazaki approached Le Guin and asked to adapt her work. Le Guin, at the time, didn't really know who he was or of his work, and so she refused. I don't know exactly how that goes down, whether it was a face-to-face meeting and she didn't bother to do her homework, or it was just like a letter her agent got and she gets a lot of those and she's like, no, to all that, like, it's not happening. Apparently, though, after watching My Neighbor Totoro, Le Guin changed her mind and was much more of the opinion of, if anyone's going to adapt my work, I want it to be Hayao Miyazaki because his work is outstanding. And so she said, yes, perfect, fantastic, great, I love that. Except that's not what happened. Hayao Miyazaki did not make this movie. Instead, he passed it off to his son, Goro. This apparently made Le Guin a little bit upset from what I'm able to find online, and I do not blame her, because it's like, hey, I trust this one guy after watching his work to do my story because his movies are extraordinary, always giving it to nepotism. And this was his son's first full-length movie, so it kind of falls into that. Would you be giving it to him if it wasn't your kid territory? At least in my mind, that's part of the conjecture. I don't know, but I don't like that move. A couple little more mildly infuriating details here is that she agreed to let the son direct because she was told Miyazaki himself was going to be retiring, and so this would be like the passing of the torch. But as we know, he's come out of retirement and made another film, and she specifically marks in this blog post that that is disappointing to her. And on top of that, she was nervous about all these rapid changes to her story. Like, it was a really big departure from the source material. So she even said, like, if you want to fill in the gap between, like, a pretty big span between a couple of the stories, do what you want there. That way it's something new and different and not mutating what exists. But they still just went with mutating what exists for some reason. Do not take this as me, like, trashing Studio Ghibli or saying like they're awful or horrible. The creative process is long and complicated. This is one side of things. I'm sure there's stuff going on their end as well. But I do just want to say that I'm definitely more on Le Guin's side here, that this seems like a crappy move and resulted in a adaptation that largely disappoints fans and was certainly in its end result subpar, especially because even with the son directing, she was promised that Miyazaki would be involved and consulting, and she said it became apparent that that was not even true. Like, put yourself in Le Guin's shoes here for a minute and think about how infuriating this would be. You not only trust this filmmaker to adapt your story, she specifically notes she gave him free rein to try and make something new, which is not something she would have done for any other filmmaker. And instead of doing it himself or giving the material justice, he hands it off to his kid, who basically shifts and molds a bunch of elements from the story into something that doesn't convey your overall message or themes that you spent your life working on at all. Like, that's extraordinarily not only disrespectful, but like anti-artistic merit in a way to me. It just seems like they genuinely didn't respect the author herself. I don't want to throw around any accusation aside from that, but these are just objectively disrespectful moves. And I want to specifically note here, I like Studio Ghibli. I think they have some of the greatest animation of all time under their belts. I just wish they had seemed to care here enough to bring the same to the table, and they didn't. That can be seen in how drastically more poorly this movie is received than the bulk of their catalog. And then after the movie came out, Le Guin had quite a few disparaging remarks to make, all of which I agree with. She remarked that this movie departed from her plots so much, it felt like watching a whole new story where the characters just happened to have the same names as hers. And maybe the most important quote from all from her that kind of really encapsulates how they did this wrong comes here. Evil has been comfortably externalized in a villain, the wizard Kumo, who can simply be killed, thus solving all problems. In modern fantasy, killing people is the usual solution to the so-called war between good and evil. My books are not conceived in terms of such a war, and offer no simple answers to simplistic questions. See how that's kind of a big deal? Like, even if you haven't read Wizard of Earthsea, which if you haven't, it's very good, check it out. That is a change to source material that goes beyond like, oh, we want to just save screen time or try and cut this out for budget reasons. That's a direct violation of the purpose of the source material. And that goes into the territory of you are actually harming an adaptation instead of re-representing. It's the worst kind of change you can make, in my opinion. Theme in adaptation is one of the most, if not the most important spirit of the source material adapting to capture, and this kind of just pulling away shows either an incredible lack of understanding to the source material or some kind of direct, harsh, like, we're mad that you said no in the first place, so we're gonna just do this poorly, which I don't think that's true. That's not what they did. That'd be incredibly stupid. But it's just, it feels that way, like, right? It leaves a bad taste in your mouth to see Studio Ghibli, one of the most intelligent studios out there in terms of telling a deep story, do something that just feels so dumbed down. And I mean, the final quote from Le Guin here, I want to say here because it just perfectly sums this all up. When speaking about this movie, she said, "It's not my book. It's your movie. And it's a good movie." And apparently there were more disparaging comments said behind closed doors. And I completely agree. It's a, I would say, fine movie that does a very poor job of adapting Wizard of Earthsea to the point where I'm not going to say in my head, this is an adaptation of Wizard of Earthsea, because some of the characters were similar to the way they were in the book, and few of the shots of nature definitely conveyed the sense of beauty I get from Wizard of Earthsea. But in terms of the story told and the end messages and the themes, it gets a D at best, and maybe worse. So overall, definitely my least favorite Ghibli film so far. If you haven't read A Wizard of Earthsea, you could probably like it quite a bit more. You'll probably have it in that 5 to 6 territory that I have it in that sense. And reminder that 5 for me is average, is not failing. I refuse to buy into that idea. So 5 to 6, it's maybe a little bit above average for an animated movie in several ways. Boy, oh boy, was I disappointed with this one. It's just sad. It's just kind of sad to see a story done such a disservice when I had such tampered expectations to begin with. I went in expecting, instead I got, you know? I always use bodily sound effects for review. I really need to stop doing that. But I think it conveys the message pretty clear. Anyway, guys, like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And let me know what Ghibli film you would like me to review next. This seems to be like the most universally disliked 1 after looking into it, so I have pretty continual high expectations here. And I think My Neighbor Totoro might be up next, because if Le Guin watched it and then was like, yes, I want you to adapt my books, it's got to be pretty damn good. So I'll probably be taking a look at that one. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.